Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm going to be talking about the Titanic submersible and the crisis there. Most people have been following the news that there was a submersible that went out to go see the dive for the Titanic. This is an expensive endeavor. I think there was about 5 passengers on this submersible, and they lost contact when it was diving, when it was going underwater. Now, just briefly, I'm just going to do kind of like the highlights of the news, but in this video, it's more important. I'm going to give you a very unique perspective on, I think it's a unique perspective, at least philosophical, about society in general and what is really happening through this crisis, through the lens of this crisis. So the highlights of it is basically there's a company out there, OceanGate, and there's probably others that do dives, kind of vocational type dives, to look at the wreckage of the Titanic. All right. And the name of the submersible, my understanding is it's named Titan, from OceanGate. There were 5, I believe there were 5 individuals that were contracting OceanGate to take them down to the bottom of the ocean to take a look at the Titanic. Normally this dive is about 8 hours, all right? I'm not sure if it's 8 hours just down or 8 hours up and down. I think it's an 8-hour trip up and down. But there are emergency provisions supposedly in terms of the amount of air that they can have, or that they need for an emergency. It was around 96 hours. It looks like they're kind of like they probably ran out of air as of this recording. There was some pinging. They heard some noises, a repeat noise. They're not sure what it is, what the repeat noise is. They've been looking on the surface. They've been looking underwater. They can't find anything as of this recording. So, some of the experts are saying, well, maybe the hull gave in and they were crushed because of the pressure. Maybe there was, some sort of leak that was going on. I think probably the more probable thing is that it had a power failure and it went down to the bottom. Now there's some, because this is very expensive to do. It's like $250,000 to, do 8 hours underwater. And obviously you have to take time to travel to the site and, airfare and all that to just get to the port. But the dive, my understanding is the dive itself was $250,000 for each person. This is a billionaire game, right? Or a multi-millionaire game that vacation, right? And I think this is what's more important. Hopefully they find the individuals unharmed. But before I go to the philosophical side of this, they're running out of air. There is probably nitrogen buildup from urination. All right. Anyone that has done like animal studies, you have cages for these animals, and you have to pay attention to the urine level, the nitrogen level that starts to build up. So there's a nitrogen level that's probably building up because they probably ran out of bags to hold urine. And water is probably depleted. Their water rations have probably depleted. Their food rations probably have depleted. And obviously their oxygen levels are depleting. But what's even more important And what was the big lesson learned from Apollo 13? It was about not oxygen, it was about carbon dioxide buildup. So having carbon dioxide scrubbers to be able to soak up the carbon dioxide that the individuals are exhaling as they're using up the oxygen. So you have carbon dioxide buildup, you have the nitrogen buildup, the food and water provisions are, going down. The oxygen level is depleting. There's a lot of things that are going wrong, right? Chances are they're not going to find them alive. They're probably out of oxygen already. So this is probably going to turn into not a rescue mission, but a recovery mission. But you can hear all that on CNN, all that on MSNBC, all of that on Fox, or some of the other, local channels, right? What's more important is taking a look at this from a philosophical point of view. One side of the argument philosophically is, well, mankind, and I agree with this point of it. Mankind needs to push the envelope of exploration and technology. There's a big debate on if the hull of this vessel and all of its safety features was up to par. Probably it wasn't. There were probably corners that were cut to reduce costs and get it to market quickly, right? So the hull probably needs to be a little bit more robust, more redundant systems to make sure that something like this happens, that they can get to the surface. So I think there were a lot of things that went wrong on the engineering side, right? Lack of redundancy. You see that with just-in-time delivery, something that is just very benign, and where it comes to supply chain management. In the MBA school back in the 80s, 90s, all the way to recent time, everyone was pushing just-in-time delivery, reduce costs and reduce your costs for holding goods in your inventory so you are more profitable. And you only get, a delivery when you need the delivery, the goods, the raw materials or whatever. The problem is that when the supply chain starts to break down, you use up your supply very quickly. So in essence, when you're using an example of the human body, if you have zero body fat, then you don't have any buffer if there's starvation to be able to weather the starvational epoch. So just-in-time delivery may be cheaper, but not as robust. So this is the same thing. You apply the same thing to these systems. If you don't have redundancy, even though it's more expensive, when something does happen, a black swan does happen, a crisis does happen, the system is designed to be able to weather the storm. Fukushima is a perfect example where the redundancies weren't enough, right? They had backup generators, but the backup generators were flooded. It wasn't just the power went out for Fukushima, the backup generators were flooded. And then when that happened, the core was unable to be cooled because the pumping of the water wasn't there, and eventually it melted down, blew up. Lack of redundancy, poor risk management. Same thing in finance. Something that may be quick and cheap or very profitable may eventually build up systemic risk that leads to a major financial meltdown. Lehman is a perfect example, where on the balance sheet, when you move risk, When you move risk to someone else by packaging securities that are subprime with prime borrowers and getting a prime credit rating for that security, those individuals that bought toxic assets that they didn't even know were toxic. And the ones that were selling it move their risk off of their balance sheet, not realizing that the whole system was going to end up destroying, many asset prices, right? We lost liquidity all over. So idiosyncratic risk being shipped over to someone else in mass led to a systemic failure. Redundancy. Faster isn't farther. Cheaper isn't better. So this is where we have to look at, the proper design failure modes and manufacturing failure modes to prevent this kind of thing from happening. That's looking at it from an engineering perspective. Now, some of the friends of, there's a billionaire or couple billionaires that are on that submersible. One of the friends of this Titanic connoisseur that's on the submersible, his friend that's mentioned, it's so important to kind of push the envelope, it's part of the human spirit. And he is the person that was talking is also a wealthy person. What was interesting to see, I'm not sure if he was British or if he was American. I think he was American. What was interesting when he was saying this individual, it's the friend of the guy that's under, in the submersible. He represented a spirit that I think we've lost, and I think it's important to explore. And so he was saying that, well, he's tired of hearing people talk about people shouldn't be saying negative things about these individuals that are in the submersible. Why are we spending the money to rescue them? They're billionaires. Why is the Coast Guard using our resources for some billionaire to have some sort of extravagant vacation kind of thing that goes wrong and everyone needs to save them? I kind of understand the other side of the argument. People are fed up with people wasting money, and that it seems as though we privatize gains and socialize losses. So I can understand why the public at large is kind of upset about this. But this individual that was talking, he had a point that people need to take risks and push the envelope of technology and exploration, and realize that there are going to be failures and there are going to be successes. That's a very human thing, a very human experience that pushed society forward. I think that type of spirit is being lost. Okay, with that said, I think this is where I'm going to be very critical with these individuals that are on submersible. First, obviously, the safety protocols were not up to par. The design was not up to par. The redundancy systems were not up to par. But there's a bigger problem here, and that is that you have these very wealthy individuals. They're making so much money that they are not happy with the regular vacations, going skiing at, let's say in Colorado, or, seeing Venice, in the summer or whatever, right? They have to do these extreme things. Now, if you have extreme wealth, even if you've created a lot of, let's say, nonprofits, but if you're in the billionaire stratosphere, right? You have so much wealth compared to the average person that taxation should be much, much higher, like 50% or more of the revenue that these billionaires realized gains that these billionaires are making. Yes, they create jobs, but they also have made so much money that, you look at the way they buy. Who really needs a $34 million yacht that is literally the size of like 6 houses? you know it goes to the extreme. And when there's nothing wrong with gaining wealth and building enterprises and stuff, but that wealth gets so extreme and so out of proportion that there needs to be higher taxation. Now, what happens is that a lot of these very wealthy individuals, they create these nonprofits and move all the funds into these nonprofits and try to hide the money. I think there should be some legal. I think that there needs to be some regulation in the amount of money that you can push into a organization like that, a nonprofit, preventing taxation. This is exactly what the Zuckerbergs did, right? So, billionaires, these individuals, if they're, 20, there's no big difference between a 24 billionaire and a 50 billionaire or 150 billionaire, right? Other than just money. I mean, it's in such a stratosphere that they can buy anything. And it gets to a point where there's too much disparity. There's way too much disparity. And there needs to be higher taxation. Historically in the United States, wealthier individuals were taxed. So, at a higher tax rate. So I think we should add that. We should, and not just by a little bit, by a lot. Nothing's preventing them from being a billionaire, but there needs to be a means of kind of trying to equalize this the haves and the have-nots. It's growing. The number of billionaires that are being created in every year is increasing, right? And more and more people are falling behind, and I think that's a problem. Now, that's more of an economic side of this, right? That they are making so much money that they have to do these extravagant type, extreme vacation kind of things for bragging rights. Some people, I'm going to say this humbly, all right? Some people do not have the privilege to be in certain types of social settings that are of affluence. All right. Many people in the United States don't have it. Some people do. And when you're in that environment where you have access to that kind of affluence, you'll notice that during conversations, it's not about many things about the conversation are, what boarding school did you go to, or what school did you go to, or it's not where you work, because it's assumed that you have a company. How many companies do you have? How many lawyers are on your staff? Which designer, which clothing designer do you affiliate with in terms of your wardrobe? And the higher stratosphere, they go to like, well, did you go to space? Did you go to the Titanic? Did you go to Mount Everest? See, the conversations when you're talking with these people are a lot different than your average conversation with others. And only people that have seen this kind of environment, and it's relatively prevalent in New York in certain circles. It's probably prevalent also in certain circles in Hollywood. and probably also in Washington, D.C. But they all have their own little genre. They have their own little, uniqueness. But this is the point, is that they do this for bragging rights. They're sitting at a table of 30 during some sort of gala that costs $500 to $1,000 a plate or more. And, you know, this is their conversation at the table. Johnny went to the Titanic on Ocean, Gate, right? Last year, what did you do, Susie? Well, I climbed Mount Everest. You think I'm exaggerating? I'm not exaggerating. People talk like this in these higher level circles when you're talking about the Billionaire Club, right? So, so we have to like pull back and like go, well, wait a minute here. Yes, we need exploration, but when you're doing it because you have money and you are doing it for bragging rights, then it's about the character of it is changing, right? So let's bring this specific to the Titanic. The Titanic was a disaster in the making. There was a lot of hubris when they were building the Titanic, very similar to the hubris of the Titan. What is also interesting is there was a book published that was talking about a vessel, the Titan, and that there was hubris and that it sinks. This was written 14 years before the Titanic sunk. All right, I believe it's 14 years. So when this book was written, it was kind of a fictional warning of what mankind was doing. There's hubris of industry and of technical prowess that leads to a catastrophe. It just so happens that the Titan, falls in this category. It's a catastrophe in the making because of hubris. What was interesting about the Titanic is there were some commoners that were on there, but many individuals were very affluent, some of the, the wealthiest individuals in the world at the time were either scheduled to be on the Titanic, like J.P. Morgan, who bailed out at the very last minute, or, others that were on the Titanic and died, on the Titanic, sunk with the Titanic. So the point here is that the Titanic is representing in a larger scale the hubris that was happening in 1912, right? Yet the book was written 14 years before, so it's kind of forewarning. Sometimes I think people that are in the arts or in writing, either in like painting or in movie making and writing, sometimes they can tap in and they get a feel for like what the future is going to be. Why that is, I don't know. But the point here is that it was almost a hint, and that things rhyme. They don't repeat. They rhyme. History rhymes, and there are Fibonacci's and cycles of things that come back. So when the Titanic sunk in, I believe it's 1912, right? You have 2 years later roughly 2 years later before World War I starts. Is it possible that the Titan is also tied to this kind of like harmony of events? Even though they're not related, they're not causal. They're part of this mosaic of the time. Is it possible that this related Titan submersible trying to go see the Titanic with a lot of hubris ends up being a catastrophe, and that 2 years later we actually see World War III? because that falls in line. We're in 2023. And like I've been saying for a long time, 2025 is a very scary year. And that's the prediction and the warning of Taiwan being invaded by China. And that may be the flash point that leads to World War III. So this is why I think it's important to understand like some of the mosaic of the time of 1912 and what we're seeing today in 2023. Now, maybe that sounds fanciful, but it's something that I think we need to pay attention to, because even though there are events that are not causal, there are harmonies within epochs, and that it kind of hints at what's going to happen. Life is a Fibonacci sequence. It's cyclical, but it's not a full circle. It's a spiral. It's either spiraling inward or spiraling outward. So that's why it's a rhyme. It's not perfect. It rhymes. These systems rhyme. So that's one way of looking at this. Another way of looking at it is that the Titanic, even with all the hubris and all the wealth that it was and technological prowess that it represented, it sinks, right? It's an iceberg, sinks. Everyone knows the story, right? It's a graveyard. There are some people that survived, but many people didn't. It's a graveyard. Leave it alone. And this is the problem with these billionaires. There's a lack of respect for the graveyard. There's a lack of respect for the lost souls from the Titanic. Okay, finding it, yes, for oceanographers, that was a big technological feat. Okay, but it doesn't need to be commercialized. And some people will go, well, we need to investigate the wreckage to make sure that that we understand how it's changing over time and rusting away, and how the structure is changing. Why? Why do you need to know that? Why do you need to know how the Titanic is rusting away in the Atlantic Ocean? Why? Sometimes just leave it alone. And I think that there was this kind of voyeurism, this kind of desire to see this catastrophe and be a unique individual. There are less people that actually have seen the Titanic with their own eyes, in a submersible, than individuals that have gone out in space. It's a little different than space. Space, it's pushing the envelope, and literally, it's possible that in the future of humanity, in the long term, is going to be exploration of the planets and of other solar systems. Once we get to that type of technology, we know that our sun is going to give out eventually. Now, either we find a way to continue humanity forward through exploration, or humanity will die out on this planet. So, and that's the big leap. Species that can do it, I think, are the ones that are surviving, move forward. Species that can't will become extinct. That's our future. We're either going to be an extinct species or a species that is exploring and pushing the envelope. So exploring space is a little different. Of course, exploring the ocean is important too, but we don't it doesn't make much sense from my estimation for the billionaires, and that's not an understatement, the billionaires, to use Titanic as some sort of vacation site, to, as bragging rights. They pepper it with, we have, other camera work and research that's going on to understand the structure and all this. It doesn't need to be. You don't need to know that. There's certain things that you need to know and certain things you don't. And there's important, someone said, well, why can't the military, right? This Coast Guard, I guess you can say the Coast Guard is part of the military in a way, the Navy, right? They don't have capability to go down to the levels of the Titanic. You know why? They do have cable systems that can go down to that level, but they don't have submarines that go down to that level, right? The reason being, there's not a military importance for that. Now there are systems that can go down to the ocean floor for welding and cabling, right? And so the oil and gas industry needs this kind of stuff, and cabling, the cabling industries would need this type of capability of rovers going down and doing welding or cutting or drilling, that kind of thing. But to have a submarine that can go down there and just save people, at 12,500 feet, 2 miles deep, is not the mission statement and the capability of the Navy, right? Because the military operations are, I believe the guy said, 1/10 of that. So, this lends itself to this idea that why do we really need to turn this catastrophe, the Titanic, into some sort of vacation site for billionaires, only for them to go up 3 months later, do a gala that they're paying $1,000 a plate, $2,000 a plate, or whatever. And they're sitting there and bragging about what they did for the summer. It's disrespectful for the dead of the Titanic. It's disrespectful of the site. Leave it alone. It was an amazing effort for oceanographers to be able to locate it, to be able to survey it, but leave it alone. It's a tomb for many, many souls. And so I don't feel bad for these individuals that are in the submersible that are disrespecting the actual site by turning this into the billionaire vacation site. So you're also starting to see it with Mount Everest. All right, the ones that climbed up Mount Everest at the very beginning, right? They were doing it without extra oxygen. They were doing it without Sherpas. They were doing it without a path that was already planned for them. They figured it out as they went, right? And that's the exploration part, all right? But then when they have commoditized it, they have turned it into a vacation industry for the wealthy. Billionaires do it, but also millionaires do it, right? And what they're finding out is that so many people are doing this, right? And this is a means for Maple to make money, right? They're pushing too many of these explorers and climbers up, and so during certain seasons you can't go because it's too dangerous. So there's this small window to do this, and they pay, and sometimes because of weather conditions or whatever, they're losing the window of opportunity to be able to climb. So there's pressure. They're going to say, oh, I spent X amount of money to be here, $150,000 or whatever it is, to do all these base camps and to, you know, climb, and now I can't hit the summit. So there's pressure. There's Sherpas that are dying because of this added stress, because they're going up and down, up and down, and up and down, right? And sometimes the weather conditions aren't favorable, and there's catastrophes that happen. Disrespecting the mountain for them to have bragging rights when they go and have a gala dinner. This is a problem. This is a human psyche issue. So, you know, some people would say, well, you know, if you can do it, then you should be able to do it. Right? You know, and the reality of the situation is that these individuals are at least doing the Mount Everest thing and these other, you know, extreme climbs like K2. When they do these extreme climbs, they're putting other people in danger. A lot of them are not in shape to be able to do it. They're maybe a little bit too old to do this because, you know, they've already, you know, gained some wealth, and they're a little bit maybe hit that range where it may not be great for them. They can't even really climb it without extra oxygen, right? Some do it without oxygen, but others, they have to have the extra oxygen, right? So, you know, if you just said the individuals to climb Mount Everest and you can't have supplemental oxygen during the climb, you can have supplemental oxygen only at base camp, you would see more than half of the individuals not being able to climb. That's how important that supplemental oxygen is. So when someone is doing this, they're kind of cheating in a way. You know, they didn't really climb Mount Everest unassisted. One, they needed the Sherpa, and two, they needed the supplemental oxygen during the ascent. So that's not like the early climbers of Mount Everest. So again, they kind of dumb it down so it turns into, you know, some sort of commercial endeavor for the wealthy, for bragging rights that could put other people in danger, right? And there's lots of documentaries about, you know, these types of dangers that take place on Mount Everest. This is another example with this whole Titan thing and the Titanic. So it's individuals that are not respecting the site, specifically this tomb that we call the Titanic now, at the bottom of the ocean. Leave it alone. If you want to do exploration of other, you know, caverns or something at the bottom of the ocean, fine, right? But no, it's always bragging rights for, you know, to say, I saw the Titanic. You know? Meanwhile, the United States government is spending millions of dollars for this rescue or recovery mission that's taking place. And this, the United States government, and probably other government, maybe Canada is also involved in the rescue mission, but we should give the billionaire family the bill for the rescuing, you know, because they took risks that they probably shouldn't have been taking. And two, you know, Ocean Gate should have had a better system that had more redundancy to prevent something like this from happening. Hopefully they are found alive. I don't think they will be. They may not even be found at all for a while. But the bottom line is here. We need to start questioning why people are doing these things. Is it really to push the science and push the exploration? Or is it some sort of fascination and bragging rights of something of a catastrophe? Leave it alone. Just leave it alone. So most likely the Titanic took another series of dead with them, another group of individuals. It's ironic, I think, that it's called the Titan and that it had a problem when descending to the Titanic. Probably lost power and is on the bottom of the ocean. And they're probably dead as I'm doing this recording. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. But we as the human race, we as the citizens of the world, right? We need to really step back and like go, do billionaires really need to be paying for it? Should they be doing this? Should they have the means to do this kind of stuff? And I think that when it comes to the Titanic, it's a sacred place for those individuals that lost their lives. It represents the hubris of humanity. And once again, we didn't learn the lessons from the Titanic. Hubris prevailed. And now we have a catastrophe with the submersible. In a way, mankind is fascinated at looking at destruction. It's fascinated at watching the, something that's very negative. They're not most people are not fascinated with looking at the positive. They want to see the train wreck. They want to see the train wreck happening, and they want to see the after effects. They don't want to see the train being built. They don't want to see the train in its normal operations. And you saw it with the shuttle. Shuttle, when it was first launching, everyone was paying attention. But when it became relatively routine, or rockets became relatively routine to launch, people lost viewership. And they just said, oh, it's boring, in their eyes. But when the shuttle blows up, then everybody starts to pay attention because everyone focuses on a disaster. Right? Well, there's this kind of voyeurism that I think is a major problem with mankind. So now this is where it gets into kind of the more metaphysical here. The human species at our point in history is losing religion. It's losing our connection with the divine, with spirituality, independent on, what system you gravitate to. But we are seeing the de-evolution of man, with the destruction of the family unit, the destruction of spirituality, the destruction of respect for life, in utero and outside of the uterus. But there's many negative things that are happening in the world, and I think it goes all the way to that very core. We're losing our spirituality. And so if you took that and applied it to what was going on with the Titanic, you would realize that there is no need to be down there. Just leave them alone. So, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be exploration somewhere else. Of course we need to explore. But that's a tomb of many souls that should be just left alone. So that's my take on the submersible. It's a little bit different take. It's a video. It's a critique of mankind, and that we need to look in the mirror and realize that if we don't add some sort of level of spirituality in our lives, we will continue to see our societies decay, de-evolve, and will spiral out of control. And we will, lose a lot of the good opportunities that we were born into. That's my take. Hopefully you enjoyed a different perspective on this crisis. Please subscribe to my channels. I have 3 channels on YouTube. All the links are in the description of all my videos. So click the link, subscribe to all 3 of the YouTube channels. Please subscribe to Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Those channels have a lot of my archive work. on top of my contemporary work. Please subscribe to Patreon. That helps support the channel and allow me to do these types of videos. And also, please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. That is the-studio-reykjavik.com. And you can take a look at the books that I have written over the years. I have many books that I think I started publishing in 2012. And take a look at the store that I have. I have a lot of supplements. I have nano silvers, liquids and gels, soaps and lozenges, C60, which is a very strong antioxidant, a lot of supplements that I've partnered up with Boomer. So just about any supplement you need, it's there, you know, the major ones. And I have an all natural deodorant, either in citrus or peppermint and tea tree. But specifically, please go to the store and, you know, take a look at the Boomer products that I offer. You know, like for example, I have magnesium and zinc, right? And I, you know, in the news, you know why to take zinc, right? This is my powdered probiotic and prebiotic, right? I also have capsule form through ammo, but this is a powder form. I take this, you know, every day. So get good gut health. But when we're talking about good gut health, it's important to realize that when individuals are either working out, you know, and they're like doing a lot, you know, let's say they're, you know, kind of competitive athlete at the amateur level or at the professional level, or as we get older, you know, we start to decline in our ability to secrete certain types of enzymes out of our pancreas. Our pancreatic health starts to decline. It's when you're either working out and you need supplementation to fuel your body, or you're starting to see a decline in your pancreatic function because you're getting older. Taking supplements to help with the digestive enzymes that the pancreas will secrete will help you get the energy that you need and the proper vitamins and minerals to be absorbed in your body. So that's why gut health is very important. But part of that gut health is making sure that you have a healthy pancreas and also the right concentrations of enzymes that you need to break down the proteins, the carbohydrates, and the lipids. Another product that is really good is the turmeric in ashwagandha. Lowers inflammation. The turmeric helps to lower inflammation, and ashwagandha helps with blood glucose levels. So take a look at the products that I offer for Boomer, and it'll help with your health and help to support my work covering the news and giving you my perspective on things. Please use the discount 5, all caps, discount 5, you'll get $5 off on any order, and that will help with the shipping. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.